Okay, this tutorial today is just basically going to be an intro to programming native iOS apps with Swift, obviously within Xcode. So really things that I want to cover today, just basic connection between the UI and the code behind, and a little bit of logic and a little bit of Swift code, but there's going to be some nuances that obviously won't be covered here. This is just really a jump off point or a starting point to get students programming in Xcode. So without saying too much more, this is really the first thing that you're going to do. Obviously, you're going to open up Xcode. From there, you're going to create a new Xcode project. So you're just going to click on here, and we should have something pop up here. For simplicity, we're just going to do this single view application. You can see there's lots of different options here. We have tabbed application, but let's keep things simple. So this is just a basic iOS application with a single view. So we can click next. From here, let's just go basic Swift app, we'll call this. You can see it automatically grabbed my organization name, EducateSoft, and then we use that kind of reverse website kind of syntax there, com.educatesoft.com. Language is Swift. We want it to be a universal app. We can leave everything else kind of as it is. Okay, and then you can see it's just going to create there in my documents. That's where I want it. And I can hit create, and kind of my basic app will appear there. Don't worry about the code signing stuff. That would be something we would think about later on when you want to publish the app. Things like naming, you want to really give that some thought before you get going on building an app. But you can see here our app has been created. And this just kind of is a basic properties file here that we have. But as we move into the project here, you can see we have a few files that were created. Our app Delegate, which kind of controls the flow of our app. You can see here application will resign active, application did enter background, application will enter foreground. And so this would control the life cycle of the app. The two main files that we're going to be working within are the view, which is your main storyboard here, and then also the view controller where the code behind will be stored for that. Without any further ado, let's take a look at the storyboard, and let's add, first of all, some UI elements and set up our basic UI. So you can see with the storyboard here, this would look like an iPhone, okay, or iPad, or whatever our device is. And we can kind of scroll through that. I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on how to organize the layout. You have stack options and different things. We're just going to have hard-coded layout, and we're just going to manipulate that as is. You can see I can drag this around, and this is our kind of visual place where we're going to put the UI. So first thing that I want to add is I want to add a few buttons. I'm just going to make a basic calculator app. So let's add a button that is for addition. So let's go, let's add button. Let's see if I can get a button here. So we have a button, and it's just simple drag and drop. And when we want this calculator to add, you're going to press that button to do an addition operation. So let's just call that button add. And you can see the properties show up here on the right hand in this little panel here. And so I can, as soon as I hit enter, now that says add, and add another button here. Just quickly make that button named. I'm going to go sub for subtract. Actually, I can go subtract. I can do the full name. Enter. Now you can see, very nice way to kind of resize stuff, easy to do. Subtract. I can add another button. Call this other button multiply, hit enter. resize it a little bit. Add another button here. Call this one divide. From there, we'll just make a basic place where we can do operations. So let's just search down here. Let's get a text box. We need a text box or a text field. It's called in Xcode. I'm just going to draw in bring in a text field here. That'll probably be fine. Probably doesn't need to be so huge. It's just going to store small numbers. Maybe I'll slide that over a little bit. We'll see how this shows up when I actually launch the emulator. But so we're going to call this one. Actually, we don't have to name this anything right now. I'm going to bring in another text field here. It's going to store a second value that we're going to enter. You can see that there. Then let's actually, there's a button. I want a calculate button that we're going to do, so let's find another button. And we'll just call this button calculate. You can see fairly easy to build a UI fairly quickly. Like I said, I'm not going to cover alignment stuff right now, but there are a lot of things you can do to adjust your alignment to work better for multiple devices, which this alignment right now probably is not going to appear awesome on multiple devices, but just I'll kind of line things up a little bit to the left here, but kind of lined up there. You grab a couple labels here. Label. So let's put one that's just going to be an operation. I'm going to set this label to the text value to just a plus sign to start with. By default, we'll have it set to addition. I'll move this over just a little bit. You can see there's other properties like centering that I want to do, which makes that better for this. I'm going to add another label here that is just going to be an equal sign. Once again, I'm going to center that as well. And hit enter. We have that. And the last thing I'm going to add here is I'm going to add, so we get a label that's going to display an answer as well. So let's just drag one in here. And for now, let's just put a question mark because we don't know the answer yet. Good enough. And center that as well. That's fine. I think I actually want to have these text fields centering as well. Okay. Anyway, so we have a basic UI set up. We can hit an add button that's going to switch the operation from a subtract button, multiply button. It's going to change the operation. I wanted to change this value and change the operation for our math. And then we have a calculate button that hopefully is going to do the calculation for us here. That's our basic UI. So that's how we're going to kind of set things up. Now, the view that we're going to move to so we can kind of connect our storyboard here to the view controller where we're going to handle our code behind is we're actually going to move to this view up here, this editor view. It's two little circles that are kind of looped together, the editor assistant it's called. If you click on there, it should, and it doesn't always line up awesome to start with. This little button down here seems to kind of sort that out for us. But then what we can see here is now we have, I'll just drag this over a little bit. We have the code here, and then we have the UI set up over here. So now we need to make the links, and we can do this just by clicking with the control button and then dragging, and then it's going to add that connection for us. And there's going to be some different connections we need. For the buttons, we need to connect for an action, and then for these we need to the text fields, we need to have an outlet for these different text fields. So let's kind of take a look at that. So let's first of all, let's add this button, and I'd like to just drag this in under this view did load and save memory. Let's just make a little bit of space there. Actually, you know what? The actions, it's an action, I usually put that down near the bottom, and at the top here, we're going to put outlets at the top. So let's just kind of do that. So with the add button, I'm just going to hold down the control, and you can see that it kind of gives me a line that draws across, and then I can come over to my code behind the view controller, and then it's going to ask me, okay, well, what the heck do I want to call this? I want it to be an outlet, and you can see I have the option of outlet or an action or outlet collection. We don't have to worry about that now. We want this to be an outlet. Actually, we want this to be an action. We want this to be an action because it's a button. Okay, and so we're going to call this, just using camel casing, let's call this button add. Touch up inside any object, and that all looks good to me. And so I'm just going to hit connect, and it's going to add that code for me here. So inside these brackets is where we're going to add our logic that we want to happen for that add button. But let's add all our actions first for all 5 buttons, and then we'll start talking about code at that point. So next thing I want to do is I can click on subtract. Same kind of thing, hold down the control, and I'm going to drag that in over here. And once again, we want to make this an action, and I want to make this called button sub would be good. Button sub, touch up inside, we'll connect. Okay, so we have kind of nice orderly code starting to happen there. Click on the multiply, hold down the control button, click and drag in our action there. Again, choose action. We'll call this button mul for multiply. Connect. And then the other button that's going to switch the operation, I'm going to hold down control. I'm going to click and drag that in. Choose action. I'm going to call this button div and connect. Okay. The last one, which is going to be where we do our calculations, and we'll add a function for that in a minute, is our calculate button. Let's make that connection as well. So once again, click on the button, control, drag, and grab the action. And we want this to be called button cal and connect. Okay, now we have a place that we can kind of add some logic in those. In other languages, you might call this like an event handler for these different UI elements. So we want to add some outlets here. We need an outlet for at least these 2 text fields and these 2 labels here. So let's do this. So let's go here, and we're going to add our outlets up here. So I'm going to once again do something similar. Okay, this time I do want it to be an outlet, not an action. And so I'm going to call this text, and I'm going to call it num1. Connect. And I'm going to also do this here. And same thing, hold down control, drag across. It's an outlet, text, num2, connect. I wanted to do the operation, so let's go here, down control, put that in, and we'll call this LBL, and we'll call it op for operation, connect. Then we want to move on to the question mark here, which is going to be actually our answer. So let's go control, click and drag. Let's kind of get this under here, find some room, and we'll call this LBL answer for label answer, and then connect that. Okay, now that we've made the connections to the UI, we're able to kind of start adding some logic and code here. Now you can see there's a couple functions here. View did load and did receive memory warning. We're just going to leave those, that's fine. But we're going to add a section here underneath our outlets, and we're just going to call this public variables, and we're just going to, you can see I'm commenting that out. Very similar to a lot of other C-based languages for comments. And then we're just going to put a variable here. We're going to call the first one op. And we're going to set its initial value to 1. We're going to have addition, and I can put a comment here. Add equals 1, sub equal 2, mul equals 3, and div equals 4. And so we're just going to have that integer variable change as we press buttons to select the type of operation. And so I just have a comment there. Actually, I'm just going to enter here. I'm going to move this comment up above that line there. Just cut that out. Paste it in here. There we go. Let's just do this so this looks more normal. I'm going to add a second variable here, and I'm just going to call it answer. And it's going to be originally set to 0. So you can see we can declare variables very similar to other languages there. Beyond that, next thing that we're going to want to do is I'm going to actually add in a function. And so let's just get into how Swift functions work. We're going to have a calculate function that actually, when we press this button, calculates. So first thing that I'm going to type is func, and then from there what I'm going to type in is calculator and open brackets. I'm going to add some arguments. Now when I want to add, the first variable I want to add is going to be we're going to call it num1, and it's going to be of type int. And you can see how I did that. I put the variable name, or the argument name, it's a variable, colon, space, and then the type, which is int, and then a comma for my second one. The second one is going to be num2, we're going to take in, and it's also the type int, and then I can close brackets there. You can see these are going to eventually take the values of those two text fields. And then I do a little kind of arrow thing here, and this gives me my return value, and I actually want to return an integer as well. And so that's how you kind of set up functions or methods in Swift. Arguments are put into the function this way, and then you have the return type at the end. And then we can have our curly brackets, or we're going to have our logic. I'm just going to put return answer here to be, that's going to return, that's going to be the return value of this function when we use it. And so then we don't have errors right now. Now let's put some logic in here. So first of all, let's go if and we'll say op, which we declared above, equals 1. Then we want to add, right? So let's put in the logic to add. Let's go answer equals num1 plus num2. So some basic logic there. So if our operation is 1, and we kind of said, well, 1 is addition, answer is going to equal number 1 plus number 2, which makes sense. Then let's put else if op equals 2. I could probably do a case select, but I'm not going to do that here. Answer equals num1 minus num2. So if our operation is subtract, and then else if op equals 3. You go. Answer equals num1 multiplied by num2, and then we'll just do an else just because probably should be an else if, but I'll do an else just because it's going to be the only other option that I'm going to allow. I'm going to say else answer equals num1 divided by num2. And then we're going to return our answer, and then that should really be the end of our calculate function. So it's basically just making a choice based on what our operation is, and it's going to calculate. Okay? I could have that operation come in as an argument, but for now let's just leave that. Okay, from there we're going to go down, and we're going to actually, first thing we're going to get our app to do down here is we're just going to get it to change the operation based on the add button. Okay, so let's get op equals 1 when this button is pressed. So we're kind of working within these event handlers down here now. And so op equals 1, and then down here we have, let's also change that label. So let's go label op. I'm going to change it. It's text value to equals the plus sign. So we need to change, we're just changing our UI as well here as we change the function. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing inside subtraction. I'm just going to do some copy and paste because I'm a little bit on the lazy side here. Let's go here, paste, and we're going to paste in subtraction. Change this to 2. We should be moving on. Same thing for multiply. Paste in here. Paste. Change our operation to number 3. And then change this. We're going to put an X for multiply, even though it's the star logic-wise. And same thing here. Dividing. Put paste in here. And we can just put the division sign there. And let's just to kind of make sure that we're on the right track here, let's just run it now before we do this calculate button. Let's run our emulator for the first time and see if the sign just flips. So let's just go play up here, hit the play button. Emulator should come up in a second. Hoping. Maybe I didn't hit the play. Yeah, build successful. And let's just go to the emulator and see what happens here. It's going to take a second to load up. Maybe should have left it loading before. And it's going to launch our app here. And what do we see? Currently I'm not seeing much. I'm not sure why. Maybe my UI is set a little off to one side or the other. So let's just go stop. And let's move things around a little bit. I find this is the case sometimes when you don't use the stack panel for getting things. So let's just go just click on our UI element, hold down shift button. Let's select all our UI elements. Let's move them around so we'll see if we can see what's going on here. Let's move these down here. Let's try that and see if we're able to see this when we run our app again. Okay, so it looks like I was just a little bit too impatient for that to get up. I didn't need to move these at all. So if I just hit play again, just take a look. And you might have to play with this a little bit and wait for UI. You can see it takes a minute or two for my UI elements to show up, but they are showing up there. And as expected, I hit add, it stays add. Hit subtract, it goes to subtract. Multiply and divide. And we have text boxes here that we can enter in numbers if we want. See that. Okay, so our UI is set up and working. Now we just need to kind of finish this off. So we've done nothing with the calculate button yet. Now when you fire up the emulator, it's huge. Just something to kind of keep in mind. I have mine scaled down to 33%. If it comes up at 100, you can see how ridiculous that looks. So I have mine scaled down to 33%, so that's more manageable. Okay, so I'm just going to stop my emulator now. And let's add in the stuff so that we can actually get a calculation here. So we're flipping our text, we're flipping our operation, so the last kind of place that we need things to happen is inside that calculate. Now we've already put the function in for this right here, so we're just going to continue with that. Before we kind of move into actually using the function though, we need to actually get the text from these two text fields here. So this is, you're going to have to look into some of this a little bit further, but I'm just going to kind of show you how you're going to kind of add in and receive values from those text fields. So let's make a constant here. So you type let in that button calculate event. And the constant we're going to call number 1. And it's going to be an optional integer. The understanding of optionals is going to have to be for a different lesson. Just understand that that way it kind of can have a nil value to begin with. So we're going to say integer number 1 dot text, add an exclamation mark, which is going to unwrap that, and a colon. And so these two lines of code, all they're doing is declaring a new constant of the type integer optional, and we're going to get the value of those text fields is what we're doing here. Okay, so this is going to store the value of those text fields in these two constants right here. Okay, and then from here, what we're going to do is we are going to say that make our answer equal, okay, which you remember was the type integer, and we have a function that returns an integer. Calculator, hit the tab button, and we want it to take in number 1. You don't have to. This is a weird thing when you're using a function. You don't have to. In most languages, you don't have to at all say what argument type that is. It just automatically knows. In Swift, you don't have to do the function or the argument type in the first argument, but you have to put the argument type for the second one, which is a little bit confusing at first. But and let's go here. We need this to unwrap as well. So number 1 with a exclamation mark, and then we need num2 and space, and then number 2 exclamation mark. So you kind of have to see what the name of it is here. Like I said, just a different thing with the Swift language. And then from here, a semicolon, and then we can just display our answer. Text. Okay, so just finishing this off here, the last thing that we're doing here, so we're actually using our function as you can see here. Don't worry about the reasoning behind the exclamation marks, just they're unwrapping. You can see, like I've said before about that number 2 having to be, it has to match up with that second argument up here. But those things you're going to learn about a little later on. And the first one doesn't have, it knows that automatically. So there's some things in Swift that I find just a little bit different, but once you get used to them, it's fine. And so this last line of code here, what we're actually going to do is just going to set that label that's currently a question mark to this answer here that we're getting from that calculator operation. So what we're going to do here is just go text equals open quotation marks, and then we're going to do kind of a forward slash and then brackets and answer. And seems a lot easier to convert an integer value like this answer to a string value like in this text here than it is for this operation that we've had to do working in reverse in actually getting that text value earlier on and storing it in that constant. So these things you're going to learn as you kind of learn the language a little bit more, but obviously the scope of this tutorial is not going to cover that. So this should be it. So basically what we've had, just kind of reviewing what's going on in our application here. We know we can press any button, it's going to change the operation, and that's going to be handled within that calculate function. It's going to choose based on operation what kind of calculation to do. We have each of those buttons that are not only changing the value of that operation, 1 being addition, 2 being subtraction, 3 being multiplication, and 4, is this not set to 4? Not a mistake. Being division, and then changing the UI as well. And so you can see how easy that is to change that UI there. And then we have our button calculate, kind of event that's happening down here. And that's what I would say these actions are. I would maybe even code that these actions are events. And so we have this getting the numbers, first of all, that are entered by the user, and then calculating and returning that integer value, and then we're going to display that value over here in where that question mark is here in our answer, label answer. So let's just see if this application works, and then let's wrap up this tutorial. So let's just hit the play button. That should build our app. Build succeeded. Let me just get to the emulator here. Bring that to the forefront. And it should take a second or two, but we should eventually see. So you can see I can enter in values here. Let's enter in 7 and 5. Add, it's going to stay here. Subtract, goes to subtract, back to add, multiply, divide. We don't have a better symbol for divide. But you can see if I go back to add, I hit calculate, we get 12, which is correct. Hit subtract, changes the UI, calculate to multiply. Looks like it's working, 35. Let's see what we get when we hit divide as well. Okay, and it looks like it's not going to give us any decimal value here because we're set to integers. But you get the point. Basically, our application works as expected. One thing of note here, if I do have no values entered here, this program will error. But that's probably the topic of another tutorial. This one's already over a half an hour. So good intro to how to connect the UI with the code behind in native iOS programming, and a good intro in general to Xcode, and hopefully this is a starting point for your app. Talk to you next time.